According to IDEA, inclusion means educating students with disabilities in general education classrooms. The LRE principle requires that students with disabilities be educated in settings as close to the regular class as possible, in which an appropriate program can be provided, and the child makes satisfactory educational progress. It is important to note that this is dependent on how severe the disability is.
According to the National Center for Education Statistics, in 2020, the percentage of students who were served under ideal law and spent more than 80% of the day in a general education classroom setting was 66%, as opposed to Germany, whose only 42% of students with special needs are served in a general education classroom, while 58% of students are still in specialized schools. This is a significant difference among the inclusion rates that we see in just two countries. One country who has a law protecting the rights of students with special needs, and one that does not.
Over many centuries, individuals who have had disabilities have experienced persecution and harassment and been denied access to fundamental civil rights. Before the 1970s, many legislative laws across the United States excluded children with disabilities from obtaining an education. The popular knowledge at this point in society dictated that these children were unfit to receive any form of education and should be secluded. Eventually, these children were allowed to receive public education but were ostracized by their general education peers and teachers through segregated classes. At this time, teachers were not trained to educate students with disabilities, and when these children performed poorly in class, they were labeled as failures. In more recent years, Congress has passed the IDEA Act, which completely transformed education and has made education more inclusive for students with disabilities across America.
There are also several elements of inclusion. According to the textbook Exceptional Children, An Introduction to Special Education by William Heward, there are several elements of inclusion. The first is a placement option for a child is always the general education classroom in a school that they would attend even if they did not have a disability. Children should not be denied access due to their disabilities. Children should also have access to the appropriate support needed and are not made to go into a different setting to receive the support. This means the support should be available to the student in the general education classroom. They should not have to leave the classroom to receive this support. The number of students in the classroom without disabilities should be higher than those with disabilities. Students, regardless of disability, should receive their education with students of the same age group. Students with or without a disability should participate in a shared educational setting and pursue the same learning outcome.
Effective inclusion relies on the quality of instruction and the ability of an educator to meet each student's individual needs. Many of the arguments for or against inclusion are based on the idea that students will not receive the same individualized and intensive attention that they would in a more restrictive environment. However, as stated in Exceptional Children, placing a child with disabilities in a resource room or separate class is no guarantee that the child will receive the specialized instruction that he needs. We also know that simply including a child with disabilities in a general education classroom does not mean that he or she will learn and behave appropriately or be socially accepted. Essentially, while some environments might be theoretically better for each child, there is no guarantee that just by being placed within that environment, the students will have the success. It is up to the teacher to provide adequate instruction and bolster the efficiency of the student's placement. Effective inclusion is a great way to provide a least restrictive environment for a student while still providing that student the quality, individualized education promised by SPED services.
IDEA requires that students with disabilities need to be placed in the least restrictive environment possible. Students with disabilities are to be educated with general education students to the maximum extent possible. Alternative placement may only be implemented on children that have more severe cases of disabilities, and these placements are meant to assist the child in meeting their individual learning goals. There is an expansive amount of alternative placement options ranging from resource rooms, separate classrooms, and homebound hospital care. An IEP will be developed to determine the individual needs of the student and if that child will require any alternative placement. Inclusion, on the other hand, is centered around integrating children with disabilities into the general education classes and social activities.
The quality of instruction is critical for student success, especially for students with exceptionalities. A teacher who does not care and who cannot effectively convey materials will have students who face continual struggle to succeed in class. Because of the concept of inclusive education hinges on tailoring lessons to individual students, a teacher must be able to effectively convey academic content in multiple, high-quality manners. Lessons must be comprehensive, well-organized, and tailored to meet individual student needs.
Among professionals in this field, there is debate on how inclusion should take place. Some professionals believe that students with disabilities should be fully integrated into general education classrooms and accepted by their peers and the educational staff at the school. Advocates for inclusion argue the LRE model has some problematic elements incorporated into it. This includes how students with disabilities have to earn the right to be placed in the LRE. It focuses more on the physical setting rather than creating meaningful services to assist these students, and assumes that intensive services cannot be done in general education classes. On the other hand, some individuals and groups oppose full inclusion. The Council of Exceptional Children, the largest organization that is dedicated to assisting children with disabilities, believes that full inclusion is a meaningful goal, but they ultimately argue that to meet the individual needs of all children with disabilities, there will need to be various forms of alternative placements to fully benefit these children. The CEC believes that there should be less of an emphasis on placement, instead focusing on creating meaningful instruction and services for these students. In addition to educators, parents are split on full inclusion as well. Many parents strongly support it, but others oppose it and think that the general education courses do not provide instruction that is intensive enough to meet their child's needs. Studies have been done that show some parents would prefer if their child spent a portion of the day in a resource room rather than a full day in a general education class.
There are several ways a general education classroom can be modified to suit the needs of others and become inclusive for all students so as not to point attention and ultimately seclude those who need the accommodation. Part of being in an included classroom is creating an environment where students are included and are not made to feel left out due to their disability. Some ways classrooms can be modified are by defining the expectations of academics and behavior for all students at the beginning of class and providing access to manipulatives to all students. If there is a student who requires a magnifying glass to see, offer one to every student so as not to make the child stand out. Teachers should ensure easy accessibility around the classroom. That way, children in wheelchairs can move to each location in the other room. Children who use equipment, make sure the equipment can fit around every space of the classroom. Other modifications include providing tables and desks that everyone can fit under, and encouraging peer interaction by intermixing students with exceptionalities throughout the classroom. Do not group all of the kids with disabilities together.
According to Exceptional Children, other ways to promote inclusivity include encouraging interactions between peers, which can help build your classroom community.
Cooperative learning is a deliberate approach for differentiating instruction and integrating students with disabilities into the classroom socially and academically. Students need to be assigned to groups to help one another achieve goals. Cooperative learning should include having all members of the group working together to achieve similar goals and holding each member of the group accountable for these goals. This not only helps them improve academically, but it will also help create an included classroom where students can feel socially accepted. It makes everybody feel more comfortable and more welcome by getting to know their peers.
The Article 7 tips for a thriving inclusive classroom give additional tips on modifications to make within the classroom, which can help foster effective inclusion. The article suggests building breaks for movement around the classroom into the lesson, which can help students who have trouble sitting for long periods, such as students with ADHD. One way to accommodate students who struggle with submitting work in traditional ways, say like a student who has dyslexia who may use speech-to-text technology, is by allowing students to submit responses through different mediums. In the case of students with dyslexia, this could look like allowing the submission of text-based assignments in an online format or a hard copy. Some students with disabilities, such as those with autism, experience special interests. Including these special interests within lessons can be a great way to engage students who might have trouble concentrating for long periods of time. Overall, when discussing inclusive classrooms, one must remember that they are different from an LRE environment. An inclusive classroom relies on many elements to be successful, such as the quality of the educator, the modifications made to the classroom to accommodate students with disabilities, and even the social aspects of cooperative learning. Although there is some controversy on the issue, many people believe that an inclusive classroom can serve as an alternative to resource rooms, allowing the student to have a more fully immersive social and academic life at school.